Welcome everyone to today's webinar, The Secrets of Copilot Success, How to Connect Your Data and Master Copilot. I'm going to be here today with Richard Swaisgood, our Director of Microsoft Professional Services, and I'm Jeff Lizerbaum, a Pre-Sales Solutions Architect here at Managed Solution. We're going to have a day chock full of information about how to master Copilot. And hey, by the way, these things aren't really secrets. They're out there. But you know what? I want to use these images anyways because I like to use DALL-E 3 in the back end. So kind of fun there, but let's get on to it. So for today's agenda, we're going to be talking about a lot of things, really in no particular order, but mainly how to make data connectivity simple using Copilot. All of that leads to other things like leveraging AI for business excellence. We're going to show you some practical steps to mastering Copilot and Azure OpenAI in a secure and compliant sense. And also, let's touch on some real-world applications. Now, through today's session, you're going to have that opportunity to hit that Q&A button in Zoom to ask your question, and we'll answer it live on today's session. Additionally, about midway through the presentation at the bottom of the hour, we're going to open it up so you can come off of mute, ask your question, raise your hand, hit that little raise hand button in Zoom, and we'll take your question live. Well, let's get after it. I think a good place to start is by going to copilot.microsoft.com, and hey, let's ask Copilot itself what its secrets are. Hey Copilot, tell me some secrets about how I can deploy Copilot successfully within my organization and give me up to 3 different use cases. So here we go. Let's see what Copilot knows about itself. Wow, it's spitting out a lot of information here. And this is good stuff. I mean, there's some things that we know, obviously, but there might be some things that we don't know about it. What I really like about how it responded here was that it put it in different categories of Copilot 365, Copilot Studio, and these are things that we're actually going to get into. I'm now putting it into a PDF document so I can save it for later and I can reference some of these secrets. But I encourage you, go to copilot.microsoft.com, ask it what its secrets are. To recap, what we talked about in our last episode was that there's really 2 main types of Copilot. There's Copilot for free, where you must bring the data to Copilot, and there's Copilot for Microsoft 365, where Copilot brings the AI assistant to you no matter what tool you're leveraging. Now, there are some few iterations in between. Copilot Studio, for example, has a few different iterations in order to build chatbots, in order to do things for your organization that helps it more on a scripted basis. But essentially, these are the 2 main versions here. As we go deeper into Copilot for 365, what we're really talking about is the entire environment of what it has access to. And last time we spoke about using prompts to get effective information back, and how these work is over a secured link. A user will prompt for information. It's going to go to the Microsoft Graph, which is your context, your content, emails, files, meetings, chats, all of those things. That's what's going to do the pre-processing and give you the semantic index. Now the third step is it goes out, it modifies the prompt, and it goes to the large language models within Azure OpenAI, and it follows responsible AI to make sure that it's giving you a proper LLM response. LLM is large language model response. It then goes back to your graph, it does post-processing, which ends up giving you your response and your application commands and so forth. Now, we said it all does it through secure links, but there's yet another area where Copilot can reach out to get data and do some different things for you. One thing is Everything's contained within your Microsoft tenant boundaries, but did you know you can actually use plugins with Copilot in order to reach out to other applications? So for example, Jira, ConnectWise, Dynamics, these are examples of applications where Copilot can connect to give you further functionality, further prompting, and further responses in application commands. So there's a lot of capabilities with that. If you think about it, essentially Copilot is twofold. It goes out and uses that semantic index for Copilot, which brings in either external data to your graph connector or your graph connector to your Copilot existence. But you can also use plugins, which gives and takes from external data from your application plugin into Copilot as well. So you can see that there's two clear paths where you can connect into Copilot. So I was wondering, Richard, can you show us from the Copilot Admin Studio where these plugins live?
Yeah, sure. Once we get to the point where you've set up some Microsoft 365 Copilot licenses, you may notice that there's a little Copilot icon here. This is, in essence, the Copilot Admin Center. And from here, you get access to various bits and pieces. So it tells you how many different licenses, whether or not they're assigned, and allows you to configure some features, right? So, for example, the feature that I was referring to earlier is plugins. So there is some plugins. So this is one of the ways that you could potentially extend Copilot going forward is the ability to be able to add plugins from organizations such as Salesforce, ConnectWise, that sort of thing. And even though we don't have access to it right now because it is currently a private preview, you be able to extend various services. So you can ask your Microsoft 365 Copilot questions related to your Salesforce or your ConnectWise. You can't see them in here again because it's not a preview, but you can go in and sort of control who has access to them. If you want to see an example of some of these, you can go into the Teams Admin Center. And the Teams Admin Center has some of the upcoming Copilot you might potentially actually see. Right now, I think if I filter, it's not going to show too many of the Copilot ready ones. Oh, some of them are. Always changing.
There you go.
So
Yes.
you can see, yeah, because it's actually supposed to say. So you can see, you can connect to some of these. Is there Salesforce one? No, not yet. But I do know that's upcoming. So you can see some of the plugins that you can use. Now, how does a plugin actually work? It depends. So if it's from Outlook or from Teams, right now plugins only work within the two. The Microsoft ones do work within the Microsoft 365 chatbot. The difference between that is whether or not it shows up under. How do I go to my home screen? Is it here? Yes. It's the difference between whether or not it shows up here or whether or not it shows up in your Outlook or whether or not it shows up in Teams. So if we go back to the Admin Center, you can see host products. The ones that say Microsoft 365 will show up as a plugin here, and you can see the little context right here. Oh, sorry, not that one, that one. You can see right now we just have the web content plugin, but as additional plugins come in, you'd be able to kind of toggle and say, hey, I want to connect to the ConnectWise Sidekick, or I want to do the Salesforce plugin, and this allows you to extend it. If they're only within Outlook or in Teams, it depends on the functionality. For Teams, a lot of that, it just depends on how that's built. The ConnectWise Sidekick, for example, allows you to have personal chat, and you can just chat like a one-to-one chat, except it's your ConnectWise Sidekick. So if you're using that kind of stuff, so this opens up another opportunity for you to extend Copilot without necessarily having to do graph connectors. That's sort of the nice benefit. There's some cons, and unfortunately, if something is a plugin, it interacts only with a plugin. So you can't, for example, have the ConnectWise Sidekick data and the Confluence Cloud data sort of interact with each other. But it does allow you to extend into that pretty easily. So if you wanted to, for example, ask, hey, what are the top 10 tickets for this client? You can use a ConnectWise Sidekick, and it'll come back and give you the top 10 tickets. So it's kind of a neat thing, and you'll see a lot of organizations start publishing more and more plugins to extend that. So you don't necessarily have to go in and do a complex graph connector integration or anything like that. You can just go in, find Salesforce, and add the plugin, and you'll be able to extend your Microsoft 365 Copilot that way.
That is so
Cool.
cool. Awesome. Yeah, that was a great overview. So that's cool. So you are also showing me that in Teams itself, that you can actually go to the applications within Teams and click on Works with Copilot, and you can see all the applications that are compatible within Teams that are going to work with Copilot as well. So lots of cool stuff there. That's a good way to also look for additional plugins. All right, well, thanks, Richard, for the overview. And now that we know how plugins interact with Copilot, there's actually an underlying secret that we should all be aware about, and this is how to practice AI responsibly. Now, managed solutions methodology, we follow what's called the 6 Cs, as you can see here: collect, cleanse, condition, comply, compute, and connect. And we're going to dive into this a little bit later. But Richard, can you show us, like in real life, how to apply good security, good compliance when implementing Copilot?
So let's talk a little bit about what to do once you're planning on doing a little bit of, you're planning on using Copilot. You want to make sure everything's sort of working appropriately. The first thing I generally recommend, if you haven't necessarily gone in, is to go in and go into your security or compliance center and take a look at your secure score. If you haven't necessarily done any sort of the due diligence, I do recommend starting off with a security score before you do anything. Just go into the secure score and see what you've configured, what you've done. And so the secure score, and this is a demo tenant, so you can see it's actually somewhat of a bad number. 25% is pretty low. I mean, it's not the worst score that I've seen. You're probably aiming, depending on your specifics for your organization, you probably want to achieve somewhere between a 40 to a 70%. But if you go in here, and it'll bring up a lot of sort of best practices just in general on how to secure your Microsoft 365. This takes into consideration what workloads you've turned on. So if you're not using SharePoint, if you're not using Teams, as you can see, this one is missing some of the different kind of categories, mostly because this is a demo tenant, so it probably doesn't have a lot of things turned on. And so I recommend starting off by taking a look at these kinds of things. These are best practices like multi-factor authentication, conditional access policy changes. So you can go in here, you can kind of click on view all and see them sort of listed, and you can see sort of their value point. Some of these are higher priority, some of them are lower priority. And so this is a good conversation point. If you haven't turned on MFA, and to be frank, I feel like that's probably the number one priority, I would say, for most organizations. If you're not currently using MFA in some form, I definitely do recommend that. Protects you from so many different things. So go through this, and if you're unsure what some of the things mean, then you can always kind of reach out to like a trusted partner, such as Managed Solution, and we can certainly kind of help you through that. If you go in here and you're pretty comfortable, and you feel like, hey, maybe I'm hitting a 70 or a 60 or an 80 even, and you feel everything else is going to be, not stuff that you can currently work on, then there's other things that you can do, right? So the Microsoft Secure Score, this sort of tells you the overall sort of system. Once we start getting a little bit into the nitty gritty, this is where I would go in and start finding out how your data policies are. So security, there's two different kinds of compliance portals. The first one is a security.microsoft. That is a security portal. For you to look into anything related to data management or data governance, you'd want to go into the compliance admin center over here on the left.
Now compliance, here, I was going to say compliance is really what we're talking about with Copilot, because we don't want Copilot to really kind of learn off of our data. Our data should be protected, but at the same time, we don't want users in an organization to be able to search or prompt for information only to come up with some sensitive information, right? So, information they shouldn't have. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I wanted to just interrupt there, but I want you can continue on that context.
Yeah. And looks like we have a trial here. So this is the compliance portal. This gives you some general information. If you've done a compliance manager assessment, and I can get into that in a little tiny bit. But from here, you can see various kinds of alerts and notifications. This is a demo tenant, so as you can see, it probably doesn't have a lot of things in there. The first thing I would generally recommend, if your license supports it, is to take a look at what data classification is enabled within your environment, and then finding out what kind of content is in your environment. So by default, every single Microsoft 365 tenant has various kinds of classifiers depending on your license. So if you're maybe an Exchange-only organization, if you're just a SharePoint-only organization, you may not see this, but if you have one of the Office suite licenses, definitely if you have an Office 365 E5, you'll see this in here. And you'll see various different kinds of training classifiers and sensitive information types. So credit card information, all sorts of kind of different things. So this is already within your environment if you have the appropriate license. And from here, you can go in and find out, okay, well, I'm interested. What do you mean credit cards? We're not supposed to be storing credit cards in Office 365, right? That's a pretty common request that a lot of organizations get. So if you open this up, you'll see the information about credit card number information, and it'll tell you how many times it's matched. When you get here the first time, make sure that this finishes loading. By default, it'll always show 0, and then all of a sudden it'll give you the actual number. But from here, you would be able to see how many credit card numbers were found within your environment. A lot of organizations have been surprised when they go in here. They'll be like, what do you mean there's a lot of credit card information? And then they find that there's some sort of process that their organization has been following that maybe IT wasn't aware of. You can actually click into things if we had actually found some items. In this case, this is a demo tenant, so we don't have anything. But from here, you see it'll actually be broken down based on the location. So how much is in Exchange, how much is in Microsoft Teams, how much is in SharePoint, and oh, well, you did find some stuff.
There you go. I
So,
had a question, and this is a question from one of our viewers. But how
uh-huh.
long does it take for, let's say I just created a document that
Mhm,
has credit card data in it. How
mhm.
long is it going to take before it actually shows up and is kind of searchable from this content?
It needs to be indexed by SharePoint, and so that can be anywhere from an hour to 24 hours, give or take. It depends on the type of indexing. The sensitive information indexing it's significantly faster than the training classifier. The training classifier can take a day or two. But yeah, if you upload a document, you might potentially be able to see that within an hour. If you have policy tips, if you have any of those kinds of things that notify you of that kind of stuff within SharePoint, within an hour, you'll notice it if it has a credit card information and pop in that policy tip. For the training classifiers, the difference between a sensitive information type and a training classifier, sensitive info is just the content, if that makes any sense, while training classifiers deal a little bit more with the actual format of the document. So you'll notice that this is less about what sensitive information is in there, but the format of the document. So this is customer file, something that looks like it's a customer file information. If it's a banknote, if it's human resources, employee pension records. So it looks a little bit more of the document format. And so it's not just a search term. It looks at the whole document itself. So in a lot of ways, these are significantly more powerful than sensitive terms, and you can use a combination of both. So, for example, you're trying to find any employee insurance files that have credit card information, you can actually kind of combine them.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely recommend going in here and just kind of exploring what kind of stuff you have in your environment, what is sensitive. If you maybe have something that is sensitive that isn't in here, you can always go in and add your own training classifier and your own sensitive information so you can kind of find that. So if you're a federal entity and you are maybe looking for stuff that has your specific federal contract information, you can add a sensitive information type in here and it'll look for that so you can start going through that and exploring how your users are actually leveraging all that information. And it's also super useful when you're starting to use labels and all these other random things. So that's a data classification. That, like I said, that just looks at sensitive information type. Let's say now that you have discovered that there's quite a bit of credit card information, right? So how do we then go through and double check? Depending on where that data is, you'd want to control how it gets out to various different users, and there's various different kind of controls that you can do there. The most common one is data loss prevention. Data loss prevention, these are policies that allow you to prevent access of sharing of certain kinds of content. So you can see this is a demo environment, so it looks like it has some pre-made DLP policies, and this can work internal, external, in whatever direction. So if you have maybe a sub-organization that's working on something sensitive, and you want to make sure that they're not sharing it out to other people, this is how these would work. And they work very simply. You basically go in, you specify, I'll just see if I can There's some pre-made templates. You don't have to get into the super detail, but I just wanted to kind of explain a little bit of what a DLP policy, how it works, specify where it's targeting. So this covers email, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams chat, even on-premise, file servers, Power BI.
Basically, this is covering your Microsoft Graph data, right?
Yeah, it's covering everything that you can think of, just about. Even stuff that's not even in the graph, because you can extend this to file servers now. And you basically create basic rules that are sort of like, if you find something, either the sensitive information types or the trading classifiers, and let's say, let's do a pretty common one. If you find something that has credit card information, and then here we go. So you can see you can get rather complex. I don't know why it wasn't letting me do an and, but you can see different kinds of sensitive information. It contains both, in essence, you need something that needs a social security number, and it includes business healthcare insurance files, medical forms, and it's being shared externally, and it controls the actions. In this case, it's just sending a notification to the end user to be like, hey, are you sure you want to be sending this?
I'm going to just pause here and just let everyone know. I mean, this is a big secret that everyone should know about Copilot, because if you don't really think about this, setting up these rules, setting up policies, Copilot and starting, to deploy it, it could create some auditing issues. And so this is so important to think about when when you're trying to protect your data. Protect your data first. We're going to go over those 6 C's at the end of our presentation here, just to make sure everyone's aware of everything that needs to go into this. But what Richard's showing here, it gets pretty granular, but at the same time, it's very crucial to set these up and be aware of them.
Yeah, and data loss policies are often mostly for external communication, but it can also be used to prevent oversharing. And that's probably going to be a word that you're going to be hearing a lot with Copilot. Oversharing. Am I oversharing with external organizations? Am I oversharing within my internal users? So this DLP policy, instead of being for external users, we could potentially replace it and have it sent to add a condition that the sender is either a specific user or a specific department, and the recipient is another department. So this might potentially be a situation where you have 2 different organizations that you don't necessarily want them to talk, like some of our utilities organization, the generators and the resellers generally have a contractual and fiduciary agreement to not necessarily be able to collaborate with each other. And so you have to create sort of those kind of DLP rules. That's one way of accomplishing that. And so if you are concerned that users might be sharing to organizations or people within your organization, keep in mind DLP policies are not just external. They can also be used to target users internally.
There's also a lot of ramifications if your organization, say, is like a multi-tenant organization.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And as a reminder, Copilot generally uses anything that the user has view access. And if you've ever used SharePoint before, you'll realize how quickly it is for you, or how easy it is for you to give someone view access to your documents. It's sort of just built into the name. And so setting up DLP policies, getting a little bit more complex and doing some of the information barriers, which allows you to do some more kind of complex team-based separation, or setting up those DLP policies when it's targeting specific domains, really allows you to kind of control a little bit of your document sharing and email sharing to prevent that sort of oversharing that often happens with how easy SharePoint and email is to use, and Teams for that matter. I think soon you'll probably hear a lot of organizations talk about Teams and chat messages. If you are currently using Teams to chat with other organizations, that's another potential sort of data exfiltration.
Perfect. Wow. Cool. Hey, I wanted to cover one more topic and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure.
So now that we've talked about some of the Copilot secrets, and we've actually asked Copilot some of its secrets, I'm looking, in this upper right, and it shows protected. I'm signed in with my corporate account, right? And So I feel good that my data is protected. It's not going to be shared out to learn, to have Copilot or generative AI learn on my data, which is a good thing. But this was coming from one of our customers, Sean, and he brought up a really good point. How are we to protect ourselves in case someone logs in with a consumer account and uses Copilot from there within the organization? And so I was thinking, like, what is he talking about? And it actually can happen where someone inside the organization uses a consumer live account, Hotmail, Outlook.com, and there's free Copilot with that. And the thing is that now you're not protected. You could bring in some corporate communications or corporate data and ask Copilot on that data. So there are ways actually to enforce organizations to not go outside. And so one of the important articles and one of the secrets of here is really talking about the commercial data protection that comes with Copilot and some ways to further protect your organization. And one ways is to not only perform some PowerShell techniques to do so, but also there's some DNS techniques right here. And so adding certain CNAMEs to your organization to really, like, if users are being or maybe they're going to Bing Enterprise to do some chat there, which is now Copilot. From a consumer perspective, you can actually instruct your DNS to redirect them to the commercial aspect of Copilot and protect the data that way. Richard, did you want to expand on any of that thought?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a common request if users are using corporate laptops, corporate devices, and you're concerned that they might be using, Bing in personal instead of kind of signing into the corporate. You can do these. Sending in the CNAME basically forces the user to sign in. I think there's also some controls that you can do within the Edge browser. I think that's a little bit kind of further down. And so definitely things that I would kind of recommend. I think there was a little link, or maybe not. I don't remember, but there. Oh yeah, there it is. So you
Yeah.
can see how you can go in and manage some of the other settings, because I think Copilot's also available in the Edge browser. And these kinds of things are I kind of follow that falls under the shadow IT sort of realm of things. What kind of services your users are using. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of other kind of tools out there. So if that is a concern, or you're concerned that users are using personal accounts to use Copilot or using third-party AI services, I do recommend following some of the stuff that's in here, but as well potentially do sort of a shadow IT assessment to see what kind of stuff your users are currently doing. You may not be aware of what tools and services, and there's ways that we can collect that information, so we can have those kinds of conversations to be like, hey, did you know that 200 of your users are accessing Gemini, which is Google's, in essence, a version of Copilot. And then you can have conversations that way. You can kind of block them the same way if you don't want them to be using, or formally sanction them and do some kind of training and stuff like that. So just kind of keep that in mind as all these AI tools are going out there. I do definitely recommend having a little bit of sort of corporate governance on your users' devices so you can kind of control what they have access to.
Well, Richard, thank you so much for giving us an overview of really how to be responsible before we deploy Copilot corporate-wide. Now, nothing's really to stop us from deploying it in a pilot mode and getting, a few Copilot licenses to users to kind of have a look around, but it really should be in the background and in your back thought to think about how to protect your data, how to keep it compliant. And we do this by doing the 6 C's process. Collecting data, stage one. Hey, there might be some scattered data all over the place. Let's find out where it is. Let's try to centralize it, and let's try to locate it and tag it. Cleansing the data. Hey, there's probably going to be a lot of duplicates. We want to maybe clean up that type of environment so that there's less duplicates, less errors, And then on to the third stage, conditioning. This is where Richard went into showing you all of those kinds of protective policies that could be applied so that your data integrity is secure. Comply, stage 4. This is where we're assigning additional tags, making sure that the compliance is relative to your organization. Stage 5 is actually the fun part. Let's now put AI to work. Let's put the compute into AI and Copilot and start deploying and let it learn on those algorithms on your data so that within your organization you have a much better experience. And stage 6, those plugins. Let's connect up those plugins to get additional information out of Copilot for you. Well, we've reached the point of the webinar where we're going to open it up for questions from you. So go ahead if you want to hit the Q&A button, or if you want to raise your hand, we'll bring you off of mute so you can ask your question live, and Richard and I will be happy to answer. At the same time, I want to remind you that we do have a questionnaire online, and if you want to find out more about how you can get into your Copilot journey, fill out the questionnaire and we can schedule a one-on-one session with you to find out your goals and objectives. But for now, let's go ahead and answer some questions.
Hello, Madison. Um, the Salesforce plugin, the main reason why I say it's not fully integrated is because a plugin has sort of a one directionalness to it. It can't collaborate with other plugins. It's supposed to something with a Graph Connect. But in that specific use case, it can use everything else within the Microsoft 365 space. So it's in essence uses what's in your graph plus the stuff in the Salesforce plugin. The situation where it won't necessarily work is if it's Salesforce and ConnectWise. A lot of this stuff is previous. It'll probably change on kind of the functionality. But yeah, it's a little kind of technical kind of difference between the two. Yeah, you can definitely pull something specific and have it create a chart based on some other information. So yeah, you can definitely kind of use it with the Microsoft 365 stuff. It's just not with other plugins.
Yeah, and now that we have the questions coming in, we're going to kind of take them in order that we see them. I know that Elazar has a hand up, but why don't we go through some of the first questions that came through in the Q&A. So the next one was from Gary. Any use cases for SharePoint?
Well, I guess any use cases for SharePoint for Copilot, or what do you mean exactly?
Well, I would
I guess
think,
I need
yeah,
clarification.
yeah, I would think if I was asking, what are the use cases for SharePoint? Certainly, SharePoint is a huge bed of files and documents and information within a corporation that is contained, right? And with good governance, security, um, Copilot will, direct itself into that data to learn on. The other
Yeah,
aspect of it, I would say for SharePoint is that, I mean, this is kind of a $1 million question.
yeah. I feel like it's
Uh,
super broad. I mean, we could
but
definitely talk about the document management usage, the intranet functionality. There's a lot within SharePoint, and a lot of it does tie into Copilot.
yeah,
So I would
yeah,
definitely say there's quite a bit of use cases in SharePoint. SharePoint is a very big sort of backing to the Microsoft Teams and all these other kind of services out there.
yeah. And by the way, everyone, we're going to have frequently asked questions, and we're going to also utilize some of these questions you're asking into that. So you'll be able to see after the webinar, who is asking what, and hopefully we have the right answer for you. So. Um, I would say next comes James. You use Zoom for the presentation. Do we use Team? Why not use a team meeting? We asked ourselves the same exact thing. Believe us. So we, we are definitely a Microsoft shop, but Zoom tends to lend itself to webinar tools that we currently have. So really, no no affinity there, but we are a team shop. Why don't
Okay.
we go? Yeah. Why don't we actually switch it over to, I know everyone kind of has a busy day, but I want to capture the people's hands that are raised.
Hmm.
So, LSR, I'm going to take you off of mute.
Hi, thank you for letting me ask my question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. So we are a university and we have the Copilot license for the university, and we also have Salesforce. Um, and I'm wondering if especially our students, for example, would be able to use Copilot and access the Salesforce plugin to ask questions about the information that is in our Salesforce knowledge base, without having a 365 license, because that's very expensive. $30 a month for 10,000 students is a lot
Mhm.
of money. So will that be possible?
So the depending on the how the plugin exists, which I believe the Salesforce plugin right now is currently being targeted for Microsoft Teams, the user would need to have Microsoft Teams in order for them to be able to receive that. So you would need both the Microsoft Teams licensing, which generally requires a suite license, so SharePoint, email, and the Microsoft 365 Copilot license, and then finally Salesforce on the other kind of situation.
So,
Um,
so
mhm.
one way I could probably answer that, that's a great question, because there are definitely different ways to tackle this. Copilot Studio is a tool. And that is somewhat of another way that you can utilize to tie in Salesforce type of connectivity. Now, this is kind of from a different approach where you go into a Copilot Studio uh, embedded in Teams, and Teams. Just to clarify, Teams Copilot Studio, it used to be known as Power Virtual Agent. And Power Virtual Agent has some areas to be able to connect to other data sources. I'd have to see if Salesforce is one of those, but we
It is
can,
a premium
yeah,
connector. I've
yeah,
actually kind of set it up a couple times. So if you do go down that path, that'll totally work. You'll switch from per user licensing to consumption-based licensing. More likely, I think that would make the most sense.
yeah,
That
yeah.
way you don't have to necessarily purchase, and you don't have to publish it into Teams. You can certainly publish it into like an internal intranet site or something for your students. So that might be an alternate avenue. Create a chat bot, use the Power Automate premium connector into your Salesforce.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Okay. Thank
in fact, we are going to have a demonstration in our next upcoming webinar, the third in our series, about chatbots in particular and how to connect external data sources to bring that in. So stay tuned, definitely.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I guess to just kind of add, Microsoft 365 Copilot specifically, that's a Copilot for the Microsoft 365 services. And so that would be if you're trying to kind of bubble up some of the generative AI features within the Office suite of apps. So Outlook, Teams, Excel, that sort of Power BI stuff. That's sort of the part of the kind of the traditional one. If you have a large group of users that are maybe not using the Office apps, maybe they don't have the licensing or anything like that, then Copilot Studio is a good alternate way, and you can publish it in Teams if you want, or you can publish it within an internet website that's maybe available to your students.
Awesome. John, we are going to bring you off of mute and you can ask your question. And let's see, it looks like you're on mute, but yeah, I think we
I
hear you
didn't
now.
know I had my hand raised. I
Oh,
apologize.
that's that's okay. No problem. Not a problem. All right, thanks. All right, we do have a bunch of other questions here, and let me lower that hand. And from Peter, are there any resources? Looks like Richard, you're typing that answer, but
Oh,
any
I was trying
any
to handle.
resources for curated use cases that are highly useful for each of the Copilot products?
To answer to that is yes. We can send some of the stuff over if you're sort of interested. Microsoft has a couple of sessions that you can kind of take a look at how they do within various verticals. So right now they're sort of working on their healthcare center and sort of Copilot and AI for the healthcare sector. So you can find a lot of kind of use cases and how to use Copilot for customer service, to integrate with like Epic and do some of those other kind of bits and pieces. So there's definitely a lot of resources about the different products. A lot of it broken down by various different kind of verticals. If you have a specific, I think Peter, if it's the Peter that I'm thinking of, healthcare is probably the main one that you're going to be looking at, and so we can kind of send that over. If you're interested, I can send you some of the links and you can see some of the specific documentation for healthcare.
Awesome. Anonymous attendee has a great question, and I'd like to answer that one if I may. And let me see if I could do this. So, any chance you have a list of use cases and corresponding prompts that are useful for Copilot? We're looking for something to get started and have some guidance. Well, let me see if I could share my screen, and I'll see if I could do this here. So, screen number 1, and I actually set up a few prompts already that might be helpful. So prompting, by the way, you can actually go and do a starter session in copilot.cloud.microsoft. And it's kind of interesting, that URL, but that brings you to Copilot Lab, where there's a lot of different use cases to try. And actually, there's a menu option up here for prompts to try, and it gives you just a whole bunch of different prompts, and you can sort them by what kind of category or application that you're in, and things like that. But I was doing some prompting just prior to the webinar coming aboard here, and first of all, I asked, hey, tell me what Copilot for Microsoft 365 is, as if I'm explaining it to my elderly parents. And so it puts it in, nice, easy to read, consume detail here. And, hopefully my parents who are not very computer literate will somewhat understand what it's all about. And also, if you wanted to do image generations, that's always a very helpful thing. Hey, I wanted to get some images of people walking on the beach holding hands with a peer. And so that's it. You have to be fairly specific when you prompt things. And what's nice about it, after you prompt it and it creates it, it's going to ask you for other questions like, hey, do you want some seagulls in the sky there? Or do you want like a, ice cream stand next to them or something like that? So you can really do a lot of powerful stuff in terms of image generation. And then one last thing here was I wanted to run a PowerShell script that connects to Microsoft Graph. We talked about Microsoft Graph quite a bit because that's what Copilot really uses as its main data source. But if you wanted to run any kind of DevOps PowerShell scripting, you can utilize it. I wouldn't say it's perfect. You definitely need to check the scripts first and making sure they work. But if you're doing some pretty, common bulk type of scenarios, you can actually have it write some useful scripting in whatever language that you are looking for. So a lot of good features there in terms of how to prompt. I see another question in here, and I'll stop sharing my screen and we'll come back to.
I don't know. I guess we'll answer these two live.
Yeah,
But I don't know of any specific LinkedIn integrations. Do you happen to know of any, Jeff?
I don't.
It's actually a pretty valid question. LinkedIn is a Microsoft product. I
Right.
don't know. I guess I can maybe ask our Microsoft reps to see if they've developed. I haven't personally heard of any integration with Copilot with LinkedIn. I know that's probably something that a lot of recruiters are interested to sort of help them, automate some of that potential recruit communication, maybe help out. And so I don't know of any specific LinkedIn products. You can certainly use the features to chat with, generate emails, summarize stuff, that sort of thing. You can probably kind of summarize resumes, and it'll do a pretty good job of that. But there isn't a LinkedIn Copilot product as far as I'm aware. But we can kind of send that up to Flagpole, see if that's something that they might be developing in-house right now.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we got another question here from Eileen. If Copilot has a feature like ChatGPT, does it secure company info from being shared outside? That is an awesome question. Yes, there's actually a few ways of answering this. Let me actually go back to sharing the screen again. Let me go back here and just kind of point out some features about how GPT and Copilot interact with each other. Let me share. So hopefully that's sharing right now. Can you see my PowerShell screen? If not, I'll reshare. I'll assume everyone can see it. It's Zoom, not our favorite tool today, but so just to answer the question, whenever you're using a Copilot feature, whether it's just copilot.microsoft.com or maybe you're using it within Word, PowerPoint, Excel, so forth, there's a protected badge here. And what does that mean? This is Microsoft's promise that your data, whenever you're signed in with your corporate account, and that's a key feature, you have to be signed in with your corporate account in order to get this protected badge here. Now, what's to say that is Copilot learning off of your data? Well, anything that I'm typing in here, it's protected because I am utilizing my account here. If I was logging in, and this was earlier in the webinar, we kind of pointed out that if you're using a live.com or Hotmail or one of those consumer accounts, then you can still use Copilot and know your data is not protected. So how do we get around that? Well, there are some handy DNS entries that can be applied. There's some CNAME records to help protect the organization so that you can prevent from using the ChatGPT data from learning on your own data there. So hopefully that kind of covers the answer there. If there's anything else I missed, Richard, just fill in, but hopefully that answered it.
No, I mean, broadly speaking, when you purchase a product through Microsoft, they guarantee that they're not using it outside of the sort of organization, as long as you're sort of following their best practices. What is it? Their AI responsible AI stuff. They'll, in essence, kind of back you and make sure that your data is not used, and any of the output from the various kind of different algorithms and AI tools are something that they're not necessarily going to cause any sort of legal issues or anything. So Microsoft, that's sort of the big thing with Copilot, as opposed to some of the other AI tools, is that it has the full backing and data protections of a traditional kind of Microsoft enterprise product. Are there going to be any kind of depth content generation? Yeah, I mean, you can. Microsoft 365 Copilot has a couple limitations right now. There's a lot of AI products. I do definitely have to kind of call this out. Microsoft 365 Copilot, the one that's within your Teams, within your sort of Outlook, currently doesn't do any image generation. Some of the other tools definitely do. So if you could do Copilot, the one that Jeff is currently showing on your screen, the Copilot from the one that used to be called Bing Chat, that definitely allows you to generate images. But some of the stuff within Excel, PowerPoint is a little limited from a, it generates text primarily. In PowerPoint, for example, if you have it create a PowerPoint, it'll definitely create images and charts and stuff like that for you, but it won't create an image. It'll actually just pull it from the sort of the Bing Commons kind of bits and pieces. The Microsoft 365 Copilot license includes all the compute power, so you don't have to pay anything extra beyond the particularly kind of expensive $30 license. Everything else, so Copilot Studio, just about any other sort of Copilot product is usage based. And so, for example, Copilot Studio will charge you depending on the usage, but the generative AI features are currently in preview, so they're kind of free right now.
Yeah.
But once they go live, I believe they're going to charge you per sort of message, with the $200 license being, I think, 30,000 messages that you can kind of handle. And if you do decide to do like an open AI integration, which I don't know if we're going to be covering in session 3, but if you do
Yes.
want to sort of have a much more customized model, then what you can do if you integrate that with your chatbot with Azure OpenAI directly, then that's 100% consumption based. You'll be charged per individual token that gets delivered. So it just kind of depends on the different service that you're using. Microsoft 365 Copilot, you pay the $30. That's pretty much it. Copilot Studio, there's a certain cost for the actual kind of chatbot, and then if you integrate that with OpenAI, then there is the consumption-based billing on the back end.
Yeah, just a tagline on that one is that there's a few different Copilot studios, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, what I'm showing here, I think hopefully I'm sharing my screen and everyone can kind of see, is that Copilot studio.microsoft.com. That typically is around like a $200 per month license in order to utilize the studio. And you can really just create like a chat bot if you want to embed it on a website or apply it to a mobile app or things like that. That is one method. There is another studio, and we're going to get to this in our other webinars next month. AI Open Studio. This is the consumption base that Richard was referring to, where this is actually using an Azure resource, and you can actually do, set up deployments, and you can create deployment models and create chatbots that are based on a whole bunch of other models like GPT, DALL-E 3, all the new and the new things that are out there. And so when you go into Azure OpenAI Studio as compared to Microsoft Copilot Studio, it kind of looks the same, but it has different use cases. And we're going to get into that. And actually, there's a demonstration we're going to show upcoming how to create a chatbot that is really based on both Copilot Studio and it's utilizing Azure OpenAI on the back end to help define your models that you want to use and the behaviors that you want it to do. So, all right. We have another question here about, yeah.
Yeah, so for Copilot, I would definitely recommend, from a cross-department perspective, I recommend starting with recording a lot of your meetings, especially, if you're not necessarily working with a team, you may not necessarily kind of be up to date with all the kind of bits and pieces. And so having recordings of your meetings and having Copilot summarize that for you and assign the tasks for that can be a pretty huge time savings. Beyond that, I definitely recommend focusing on any sort of the summarization features within Copilot, summarizing Teams meetings, summarizing Teams chat, summarizing sort of email threads. We've all sort of been on an email thread where we sort of get thrown at the very last minute and there's like 50 different emails that kind of went back and forth. So I definitely recommend sort of starting with the summarization and sort of recap features within that. And then after that, I definitely do recommend some of the generative portions around generating emails. PowerPoints are incredibly easy to kind of scaffold, as I like to kind of call them. So you can very quickly grab a document that you've maybe written and turn that into a PowerPoint presentation. I think the first time I did that with Copilot, I was actually genuinely surprised. It's not ready for sending out to a client or anything, but the ability to grab a document and say, I need a 15 slide PowerPoint from this document and have it do a really good job, in my opinion. Afterwards, I may just need to make some quick edits or maybe change some of the formats and maybe add a picture or two or something like that. it really does cut down on the time it takes, at least for me, to kind of create PowerPoints. So I do kind of recommend kind of focusing on those, I think, five or so kind of features that I kind of mentioned. That'll greatly cut down on the amount of time that it'll take for you to uh, develop all
It,
those kind of bits and pieces.
you know what? And I hate answering it this way, really, but you could ask Copilot that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it might be a little biased, but it's going to probably
Mhm.
tell you the top 5 to 10 use cases you should use. Make sure that you ask it, be a little bit more specific, what you mean by cross-departmentally. Is it like between finance and sales, finance and marketing, things like that. And I think it's going to give you some pretty good answers.
Yeah, and that was primarily focused on Copilot for Microsoft 365. Cross-departmentally, yeah, it's more common to see kind of chatbots. If you have, it's pretty common for human resources or certain departments to get pinged with a lot of questions, to the point that they'll often sort of have frequently asked questions and stuff like that. You can use the generative AI features in Copilot Studio to very quickly, point a Copilot chatbot to some of the content, and not necessarily have to go in and build out all those sort of the lessons. So from a cross-department perspective, you can use chatbots to sort of, hey, stop bugging me about, how many vacations or what the holiday hours are, and
Yeah,
just build like a human resources bot or any of those kind of common questions that might potentially help. It helps from, not necessarily getting bombarded with all these different questions. It also helps with onboarding sort of new employees and stuff, because they don't know. Do we have President's Day off? I don't know. And so
yeah.
building out those kind of Copilot Studio with a generative AI allows you to very quickly. I mean, you could probably stand up a chatbot that's pretty good, within 15 to 45 minutes of just kind of pointing it to a SharePoint site if that's where your content is. So
Yeah.
I definitely recommend sort of thinking about that. So, what are the kinds of things that the rest of the departments need from human resources? Well, let's put that into a chatbot, and that way they can just ask the bot.
We are 3 minutes away from the end here. I know everyone has a busy day ahead, but I love this next question here. How can we get good technical support for Azure OpenAI, Copilot Studio? Microsoft doesn't really have good tech support. Tell you what, if you want to get a hold of us, I'm going to actually shoot over some information right now on the webinar to close us out. But you can always reach out to us. We are a Microsoft partner. We have Premier support, and we can most likely get you the help you need. But that might be one way of answering that question. Because yes, I mean, if you go straight to Microsoft, sometimes the support channels are, a little iffy. So um, go through a partner. I would definitely recommend that. Partners like us have expertise. We also have the frontline support through Premier. So, and the next question I wanted to answer too, when my CEO asks, what can AI do for us? Saying it writes emails and makes pictures, pretty pictures and everything, definitely not a good reply. AI transforms your organization to become more efficient, to be able to automate much more. There are several use cases just besides, doing the productivity portion of it. So we're going to get into, for example, the chatbots. We're going to show you some of the flows that go in behind the scenes that also have use cases for helping automate situations. And as Richard went into the plugins, plugins are super helpful too if you want to get more out of the applications that you're using. And so there's a lot of use cases. I love that question there, or that comment. What can AI do for us? And we're always thinking about that. So awesome. And I think we'll wrap it up with this last one. Can you tell me why AD Azure Sync won't work? MS Support hasn't been able to fix that, and can Copilot help? Well, you can ask Copilot. There's definitely a bunch of knowledge base articles that it would pull from. It will citate, the information there. So if you have problems with that, again, I'd say ask a partner who might give you a little bit better support from a difficult situation where Azure Sync might not be working. So hopefully that answers it. And you know what? I'm going to close it out. We're going to have just one final thing, and everyone have a good day. Thank you for all the questions, and we'll get this going. Let's see here. Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Well, as we wrap up the webinar today, we hope all of you have a good day ahead of you. And I wanted to call out that we have a Microsoft Copilot Studio chatbot engagement that we're offering. And if you're interested, this might be right down your alley in terms of getting a chatbot into your environment to getting some AI integrated. What we do is we perform some chatbot architecture and design concepts. We go into actually advanced AI chatbot solutions for you to look at how it might fit into your business for optimal functionality. And then we can do some real world proof of concept testing and support and training. So if you want to get started today on here, this is how to contact us in order for you to get started with your chatbot initiatives today. So really good to have everyone. We appreciate your time, and again, have a really good day ahead of you.